Get ready. The DE Talk podcast starts now. Insightful conversations and dialogue helping you put the human factor back in HR.
So today we have another Recruit Rooster takeover, where our flock will be sharing the hidden benefits of remote work, where the nation sits currently, why employees want to work remotely, why some companies are resisting, and considerations to take when looking to level up and change your workforce to follow the times. Hi, this is Ruth Toombs, and this is my second podcast, which is really exciting, where we're doing a takeover. I am, as a refresher, a sales manager here at Recruit Rooster, and here with me I have Stephen Apostolidis.
Thanks, Ruth. I'm Stephen Apostolidis. I'm a senior sales engineer on the Recruit Rooster team, and this is my first time getting to join the podcast, so we'll see where this goes.
So to be perfectly honest, I drafted him. One of our fellow Roosters actually welcomed a new addition to their family. So last minute, Stephen was willing to just take the spot, so, kudos to you for that. All right, so I like to get warmed up before we even dig into the meat of this, which is, of course, the hidden benefits of remote work and a little bit more about remote work in general. So rapid fire question time. Get ready with a twist. We're both playing, so just say the first thing that comes to mind. So when are you most productive?
It's evenings for sure.
Evenings?
Absolutely. Although it's worse. I'm a huge procrastinator, so I need a deadline.
Okay.
So Seth always used to joke from 4:30 to 5 when most people are worthless at work. I know that car ride's coming, so I would just do every single email in that last 30 minutes, just rapid fire.
That is impressive and not something I could even remotely think of doing. So I'm definitely a morning person. Even I used to not get up very early, or kind of periods of time. However, recently I've been getting up really early in the morning, but I am absolutely most productive, I would say, between 8 and noon. Like, I knock everything out in that 4 hours for the most part.
There you go. Yeah, I'm not a Jocko Willink fan. I can't do the morning 4:30 a.m. look at me getting after it picture every day. That's usually when my eyes are still blurry and I can't even think about focusing on something.
So question 2, summer or winter? I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but go ahead and tell everyone else. It's going to make me sad.
I do tend to go a little bit more winter. I know you were waiting for fall. I think it's a happy medium, but what makes things, it's a cheap question these days. What is this, like the 1600s? If I want summer, I'm 4 hours away on an airplane. So it's like, it doesn't even matter anymore. It could be in the middle of the winter and you just go to Cancun. So it's a trick question.
Okay, that's true. That's very true. For me, summer, gosh, I just hate the thought of being crammed up. And especially we live in the Midwest. We're in Indiana. So we do have some dicey winter days. So definitely summer. I'm going to miss the pool, even the super hot days. Now, I probably again know this answer, but what was your first job?
First real job that I'd actually qualify. Let's go with I was a waiter at a pancake house.
I was thinking he definitely worked in food service at some point.
Did that and construction around the same time, but we had an interesting pancake house in Fishers that was kind of old and tucked out of the way, and we used to get just like the strangest people in there. So Reggie Miller from the Pacers used to sneak into his own section and basically got the same thing every time. You knew he was there. You'd always sit in the back corner of the section that I had, and always tipped well.
I love it. That's cool. I thought at some point, we never discussed it, but I figured, we worked together, 8 years? So my first job was very interesting. So I was home educated, so I, quote, graduated very early. So I actually worked at a horticultural orchard, essentially. So it did horticultural, growings, plants, and then also this huge apple orchard. So I know just about everything there is to know about apples, and there's nothing better than just standing up in a tree all day with listening to music, picking apples. It was amazing.
So all the weird plant facts suddenly make more sense.
Does make sense.
I was wondering why you've had such a great thumb.
And I think we can kind of move on from these. These are great questions. We can always do some more at the end if we feel like it. But, we've really been looking at over the past, 3 years now, including us. We were a company that worked as a hybrid, at least 1 to 2 days at home. And then suddenly everybody's at home, right? So this has raised a lot of questions and some anxiety with employers and even employees. And as far as looking at the current remote space, it used to have such a terrible reputation. Don't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's entire industries that have been born from it, right? Yes. All the different software to make sure that you can actually track whether or not somebody's mouse is moving. Everybody was always suspicious and dreading the idea that they didn't have somebody to hold them accountable, but it's really proven, especially even through the anecdotes we can give about Recruit,
Yes.
Rooster, and direct employers, it doesn't really seem to actually come to fruition the way people thought it would. So it's been very productive on our end. I know we've had some of the best years these last 2 years.
Absolutely. And you mentioned something that was the biggest thing. It's a lack of trust with your employees, right? And I think that puts a lot of pressure on the interview process. Instead of just like crossing your fingers and sending employees home and thinking, well, are they going to work or not? Have a much better, interview process and onboarding process so you can know, well, this is the person that I've hired versus I don't know who I've hired.
Most definitely, and that's what I've always thought too, is if you're going to hire somebody in, you either trust them or you don't. You think they had the work ethic that was actually worthy of you turning them into a full-time employee. At that point, you should show them that same respect and say, hey, I thought you were qualified. I still think you're qualified. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt to do your job.
Absolutely. And that's a way to definitely allow your employees to thrive. If you feel trusted, you feel valued. If you don't trust your employees, that employee is not going to feel valued. So that's just opinion only, so we can look at some data here. Remote work, according to projections in Forbes, 25% of all professional jobs in North America will be remote by the end of 2022. And that does not take into account, of course, global. And remote opportunities will continue to increase through 2023. That's an incredible amount. So a quarter of the workforce is going to be working from home. So sounds like employers probably got to get on board.
Yeah, and especially when they start seeing some of these savings. I know there's a lot of companies, even in our area, we're in the office today, but even the surrounding office park, a lot of them are still sitting empty, and that's a lot of hemorrhaged lease money every single month going into some of these buildings.
100%. And that kind of takes us to that. There was a survey done, and it was about 1,000 full-time employees, and 505 of whom who were remote employees throughout the U.S. about their work habits and their productivity. So the results indicate that remote workers are actually more productive than their office-based counterparts. So the study found the following. So I'll let you hit number one.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first study point that we've got here, remote employees actually wind up working an additional 1.4 days per month more than their in-office counterparts. And that's adding up to almost 17 free days, essentially, that you're getting out of that employee that you wouldn't have been had they been in the office.
Would you say, too, so I just look at it, again, I can personalize this because, we work remote. I would say that, like, if I'm sitting there at my desk or whatever and an email comes in at 5, typically, if I'm done with the day, I'll log off at 5. But obviously, if, there's things that need to be taken care of, I'll stay longer. But if I was in an office, I go, oh my gosh, I got to get the kids. I got to get the dog. I've got to fix dinner. There I can actually finish that task because I'm right there. It makes me much less stressed and much more capable to get things done that I need to get done.
No, absolutely. As somebody who just professed being a little bit more productive later in the day, it's actually helped me out a lot because at the end of the day, I might have wrapped up a few tasks, had something on my mind and said, well, I'm looking at an hour drive home in traffic.
Yes.
Where I used to have that problem. Now, if there's still something on my plate and I don't want to wait until the next morning, I don't have that hour drive. I just go ahead and take care of it that evening and use that time I would have been on the road anyway. So I actually tend to fall into that camp as well. If it's the end of the day and I usually would have clocked out, I actually still take care of that.
Absolutely. And I can remember when we were in the office almost full time, there would be times where you wouldn't even make it into the office due to traffic because you live so far away. I wouldn't say even that far. It was just traffic's very thick from where you live, right? Distance-wise, it's a little bit, but you would be an hour late sometimes, and it would happen frequently because of accidents and traffic.
Absolutely. I mean, there's still so much construction, especially out in Fishers where I'm at. They're continuing to expand. And even on the way in today, they're doing both construction on the interstate to get to the highway and the highway. So for the first, I'd say, third of my trip today, I was doing about 18 to 19 miles an hour.
And I'm a road rager. I don't know if I can handle it. Maybe that's why I'm more calm now. I'm at home and I'm not yelling at people in traffic. So this stat is a little bit front-loaded. It sounds negative, so hear me out. Remote employees take longer breaks on average than office employees. So hear this. So 22 minutes versus 18 minutes respectively, but they work an additional 10 minutes every day, so it kind of balances out. So, used to I would just feel stiff at my desk in the office. I'm under fluorescent lights. It's just social atmosphere too. People will come and chit-chat, and I'll chit-chat with them. I would have to escape and just kind of walk around or go for a walk. Well, now I'm at home. I'm like, oh, I'm going to throw the laundry in. And it takes me 30 seconds. And I'm like, oh, I'll get back to work.
Yeah, I would say that's the big piece that most people don't actually think about, is it might say that you're taking longer breaks, but you have to think about all of the quote-unquote non-breaks that happen throughout the day when you're in the office, because you'll be walking by somebody's office. The next thing you know, I've wasted 40 minutes with Tom Eckhart talking about the ducks outside of his window,
Guilty
which
as charged.
doesn't happen at home. I'm not just going to randomly sit there and chat up a neighbor.
Absolutely. So office workers are unproductive for an average of 37 minutes a day, not including lunch breaks, whereas remote employees are unproductive for only 27 minutes. So that kind of, complements what we said earlier.
I say, there you go. That's your 40 minutes talking ducks with Tom Eckhart.
That's completely correct. So yeah, I'll let you take the last one there.
Yeah, we did also see that 15% of remote workers also said that they tend to get distracted by their boss, of all people, actually, while they're at work, which is less than 22% office-based employees reported the same thing.
I gotcha. Yeah. I would say for the opposite. For my boss, I'm definitely her distraction, not the other way around. But yes, I can see how it could be that way.
I say, luckily our team's still pretty tight-knit, and we don't really have an overbearing boss in Heather, so she's not one that kind of hounds you down and micromanages you throughout the day.
So I definitely
can't say we fall into that 15%.
Not at all. So we kind of covered the current remote space. So now learning more, it seems like it would be obvious why we want to work remote, but I was one of those people early on that was really uncomfortable with not being around a very close-knit work community. So let's kind of dig into there. Kevin O'Leary had a LinkedIn post that I thought was really interesting, and there was 10 different reasons why people want to work remote. So I'm going to take the first 5, and then I'll hand those off to you, Stephen. So one was, and some of these are a little, not something you might think of, but one was, do not want to increase their carbon footprint by having to commute. 2, they don't want to work in high rises where the air is poison. I know it sounds a little hokey, but I get it. Like, as far as just taking it down a notch, like being in your home in a safe, familiar environment, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even if you've seen some of those areas continue to change, and between all the construction downtown, it can be rough. I mean, there's a lot of people that have asthma these days. There's always dust in the air. There is definitely something to consider on that.
No, that's very true. I was just thinking about going out for something over the weekend, and there's an area where it's under construction, I feel like forever, and you have to roll your windows up. Like, it's a toxic smell, it's dust that will literally coat. So I would imagine, somebody who's asthmatic doing the constant commute can't be healthy.
Used to joke about that driving into Chicago. I mean, there's not a time that you're not getting coated in dust as you go past every sidewalk there.
So true. So number 3 was, have already proven that they can be productive remotely. And like we had early on said, the bad reputation with no management eyes and distractions. We're proving, as a society and from a global perspective, that you can be very productive remotely. This is a big one, and Stephen has a young daughter. Rather raise a family in affordable communities hundreds of miles away from headquarters. You're not hundreds of miles, right? But you have the opportunity.
I wouldn't say 100 miles for sure. But yeah, it is nice. You get a little bit more space for your dollar. You obviously want to have room for your kids to be able to play. You're out by a lot more parks. It just definitely makes it a little bit more convenient than being in the iron jungle, as they always used to say, and just having concrete everywhere.
So true. 5, this is one I hadn't really thought about. But we work here at Recruit Rooster globally with global organizations, and so lots of different time zones that we're working with, and many team members are already working in other countries. So it's difficult if you're in an office and you have somebody who is located overseas, and to really have all of the equipment maybe, or the connectivity, whatever it is, or maybe you would miss them if you were commuting home, but you could be stuck in the office till 7 or 8 o'clock.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And I've actually seen this one firsthand. So one of my best friends' wife is actually from Thailand, and her mother just ended up having surgery, and they wanted to make sure that she was being well taken care of. So her employer actually permitted her to go work remote in Thailand for the next 3 months.
What?
And they've shifted her hours, which now actually gives them more coverage. So she gets the benefit of being able to help her mom. They get the benefit of extra hours in the evening to help cover the hours that nobody would have actually been there to begin with.
That's incredible, and that's insightful from the employer's perspective, right? Looking at it, and they're benefiting from it. All right, so I'll let you take the next 5.
Yeah, absolutely. So number 5, they found that many team members were already... Oh, that was you. Can't follow along. Number 6, actually. So Not interested in paying for office wardrobe.
I can get behind this, okay?
That one, I know I've definitely got a couple suits sitting around. I'm a weird one that as a child I always wanted a suit.
He is such a snappy dresser, everybody.
So that one I can't totally agree with. Suit and a mustache. That's what happens when you've got a Greek dad and uncles.
I love it.
So number 7, they've seen a lot of large cities. We talked about those being problems, but New York, Chicago, San Francisco, listed as war zones. I don't know that I'd call them war zones.
Little intense there, little titch language there, Kevin O'Leary.
A little unsafe at times, for sure.
Yeah, I can definitely, understand why people would have, trepidation because of that, especially if you're in a rural area and you're not used to that, right? And you're trying to move to the big city for the good corporate job. Well, now you don't have to.
Most definitely. I'd like to say number 8 applies to us, but Indiana's a little bit behind on this one, so they won't ride subways, trains, or buses, where they'll get the latest variant of COVID. Yeah. So not a lot of public transit here in Indiana to speak of.
What is the bus line that we have? What do we have? The red line?
They do have the red line now, so they're trying to expand that a little bit.
Yeah, I agree, but I think health in general, from the entire overarching perspective, is important to people now. I think COVID really put that into perspective. If you don't have your health, you really don't have much. So why not take extra precautions to keep you and your family safe?
Absolutely, and yet another way you could be getting free days out of employees because you're not having to worry about them getting ill and missing work.
How often now, even working remote, that I've had a little sniffle, and I'm like, well, I don't need to take a sick day. But I would need to take a sick day if I was around a bunch of my coworkers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's days that I would have said I need to stay conscious of it and not get others sick. Yeah. I mean, we've all got families. You don't want to risk taking somebody out if they've got children to take care of, where I can still work at home.
Absolutely.
So number 9, not interested in paying the cost of commuting or wasting time. That one I'm definitely behind. As much as I love my 2 hours of podcasts a day, I'd rather be at home than stuck in traffic.
Yeah, and just think about those people who commute really long distances, right? And like you said, if you're just sitting there idling your car, for half an hour just trying to get there. I mean, it's wear and tear in your vehicle anyway.
Yeah, not to mention a lot of us had the added benefit of not actually having to really feel the full brunt of those increased gas prices this last year because you weren't wasting 2 hours a day of it.
Absolutely.
It's number 10, meals too expensive at HQ. They would rather prepare better, cheaper food at home. I know you and I were literally just talking about this, but I mean, I've managed to both save money and shed over 20 pounds just by cooking meals instead of eating fast food while we've been remote.
Absolutely. When my daughter was younger, I was very scheduled, regimented, cooked a lot. And once she, became an adult and moved out, and then I was just like, well, I'm going to eat this bologna sandwich over the sink before bed. It's kind of sad. So if anything, during the pandemic, during quarantine, I sat there and I relearned to cook. I grow my own herbs and, I buy from the local butcher and the farmer's market. It's made a difference in energy and weight and everything. So we're going to move along here because I have a tendency to be long-winded, so sorry about that, Stephen. So let's move on to why are companies resisting? So there's a number of areas, a few I hadn't really thought about. So I'll take 1 and 2, and then I'll let you take 3, 4, and 5. So 1 is, we've kind of discussed this already, that fear of lack of productivity in their employees. It's about FaceTime, right? So when your manager sees you, he or she feels that you're being productive. That's kind of the mindset. And that segues into 2, right? I'm a manager, right? I don't want to behave this way, but I can see why. But middle and senior managers' jobs feel threatened. Part of your job is making sure this person took their PTO correctly and making sure that they're on the clock, right? So I can imagine that maybe some individuals in those positions might feel threatened by that.
Yeah, I could definitely see where the trepidation would be there. You'd have to imagine it'd be like finding a shepherd and telling them their flock's going to go off without them. Their whole job is managing that flock. Right. So as a manager, if you don't have them in front of you, you feel as if you're not actually fulfilling your part of that duty, even though they're still being productive.
Absolutely correct.
Cool. So jumping into number 3, companies have invested in expensive office space.
You just said that.
So we've definitely seen that here. I know we had the unfortunate reality of building a brand new campus right before we were all sent home for the pandemic.
I mean, literally 10 months? 10 months maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. And even, again, looking at downtown Indianapolis, Salesforce had just recently purchased 8 floors of the tallest building in Indianapolis and sent everybody home after decking out that building and putting signage on it.
Yep. And just, we have a pretty awesome office. We had kombucha and nitro cold brew on tap. And don't get me wrong, the space does not go wasted. There are people who pop in and out, and we have, get-togethers and stuff here. But I can see why a lot of organizations, they have tons more space that's not even being utilized at all.
Absolutely. Number 4 is one I know a lot of companies are trying to tackle hard. So maintaining and creating that strong sense of culture and team spirit. So we were even just out at a baseball game yesterday. We still try to stay engaged virtually, have happy hours. I've heard of companies even doing retreats now where you'll do a 1 week, bring everybody into a hotel, make sure that engagement's still there, get those bonds stronger than ever, then let everybody go back in remote. Once you start feeling the diminishing returns, bring them all back in and have another retreat again. So definitely a lot of people testing the waters on how to keep that strong.
I think that's a really smart thing, and for every organization to consider on some level. As you mentioned, we are very connected. We are a small but mighty team. What is it, the Roosters, 19? Is there a 19? Yeah, something like that. I think it's around 19.
Right about there at this point, yeah.
Yeah, so we're really good about staying in contact with each other, even one-on-one. Zoom meetings, we're all very close. Not every company has that opportunity, but it doesn't mean you can't start creating little pockets of culture, right? You don't have to be in person all the time to make sure that you're staying connected to your team and to your leadership. I've seen a couple of recent advertisements where it's actually like training for managers. How do I create a positive remote work culture? So I would always be interested into that. I think anybody would want to be interested to learn, how do I better facilitate better conversations and better interactions when we're remote? So I think it's just putting in the work.
Absolutely, and it is a little bit of a different skill set as well. I mean, there's a lot of people that can be extremely personable when they got eye contact with you, but it is a bit of an unnatural feeling. We're a little bit more accustomed to it since we've had a lot of telesales background, but I can understand it does make things a little bit more awkward and jarring sometimes because you don't have that human connection.
I agree, for sure.
Then number 5, again, after having just built a brand new state-of-the-art office, this one won't really apply to us, but there's a lot of companies out there that haven't actually invested in teleconferencing or telework tech to actually support their remote workers. So we're actually under the benefit of every employee having their own laptop, being able to actually send them home with what they need software-wise and hardware-wise. So we were ahead of the curve on that one.
Absolutely. So we've kind of seen a little bit, Mike, where companies are resisting, and I'm curious, what everybody else, if they agree with that. So why should companies, obviously that have the right business model and capabilities, consider remote? And before we kind of jump into these, I want to preface this with, at Recruit Rooster, we have consultative conversations with employers and potential employers, really nitty-gritty from what they're experiencing, not just about their hiring acquisition or their talent acquisition process, but things that they're really struggling with and things that quite possibly keep them up at night. And one is, hey, I can't retain the workforce that I have, and I can't actually, open up that pipeline because upper level leadership is stuck in their ways by saying, we were not going to allow remote. We're going to bring everybody back in. So I really want to be able to share why companies should consider remote if you're capable of doing that, because companies are losing talent. They're just, like you said, hemorrhaging talent because of this.
Absolutely, and that's going to be one that either you're ahead of the curve and you're not going to resist the change, or you're going to really hate yourself for it down the road and you're going to be playing catch up, because like it or not, remote, I believe, is here to stay at this point, and a lot of companies are proving that.
Yep, and it is a complaint that I hear consistently, at least once a week, where companies I wish we offered remote. We could offer remote. All right, so there's reasons why we should. So adopting a remote working policy can save companies money by removing the need for expensive office space or satellite offices, right? We kind of touched on that as far as what you're going to lose out on, but this is where you're going to gain. You're not going to be spending all that money on empty space.
Yeah, I know. I've actually got a friend that runs 2 sales teams, one here in Indianapolis and one in Louisville, Kentucky for Canon, and he actually eliminated the Kentucky office because every time he goes in, he actually stays at the Marriott, and he was like, well, all of my sales reps are in the field anyway. I want them out there selling.
Yeah.
When I come, he's just using the conference room at the Marriott anyway. The amount of money he just saved on not having that second satellite office is well worth the bonuses.
Absolutely. No, I can imagine. That makes a lot of sense. I'll let you take the second one then.
Yeah, so allowing workers the freedom to actually create their own schedules and work from wherever. We've talked about that a little bit, right? As that Thailand example. Maybe sometimes you're going to go out on vacation, and I've actually even thought about this too. Say you go back a time zone, get a lot done in the
That's
morning.
true.
Even if you jump forward time zone, you can actually do your work and still have your vacation at the same time just by playing around with what time zone you're actually in. That way you can cover your hours and still have a vacation at the same time.
I love it. Yeah. So my best friend lives in Reno, and they're, of course, 3 hours behind us here in the Midwest. And it's awesome. I'm going to knock out all my work before she even gets out of bed, you know, a good portion of it. So I love this last point here. And I think this was in Forbes as well. Some studies suggest that workers would even take up to a 10% pay cut. That does
one
not
I'm always
surprise
skeptical
Are
of, though.
you?
Yeah, I don't
I think
know that
I would be
believe.
willing to.
I think most people would be willing to take 10% less pay up front, but I don't see them giving it back.
You can't take my 10% since you already gave it to me.
That's
Okay,
a
that's
rough
fair.
one.
That's fair. That's definitely fair. So do you have anything that you would add to this at all? I mean, why should companies, consider remote?
Yeah, at this point, I mean, we've talked about the labor market shortage. There's a lot of talent in different places, but you also have to remember, while internet infrastructure is blossoming at this point, you had a lot of countries where maybe remote work wouldn't have been a possibility, and that would have been a labor market you wouldn't even consider because the speeds weren't there.
That's true.
Now that broadband and fiber, and you've got things like satellite networks going up through Elon Musk's latest project, you can actually get employees all over the world that you might not have actually been able to tap into. And now, not only are you getting a new employee, they're getting opportunities they didn't have either as well.
Agreed. Well, this has been a pleasure having this conversation, this last minute step in with Stephen Apostolidis, always great. So in closing, and thank you all for joining us, we've covered so much ground today, and we have found one theme throughout this: remote work really appears to work. So like with anything in life, there are pros and cons, but if you look at the stats of employee happiness related to productivity and work quality, the benefits far outweigh the cons in this scenario. And if you're a forward-looking employer, you're doing everything you can to set yourself apart in this tough hiring market. And this might be a shameless plug, but we can help you stand out even further by making improvements to your digital footprint, namely your career website. So we're always open to sharing ideas and brainstorming what could be. So feel free to reach out to myself or to Stephen, and you can start the conversation at recruitrooster.com.
Thank you for tuning in for another episode of the DE Talk podcast. Stay connected with direct employers on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and subscribe to our emails by visiting directemployers.org/subscribe to receive notifications of new episodes, webinars, events, and more.